So the Berlin Marathon, which runners are we interested in and how do we think they're going to do? Well, there's this guy, he might do okay. Do you think he might break 2 hours in the race this year? Or what about this guy? I think perhaps sub 3 might be more on the cards for Ben this year. He's had a torrid time of late with his knee injury in the UTMB. But what about these two guys? Are they twins? They've got the same kit on. In the front there is Nick Bester from Best Athletics and Matt Fox from Sweat Elite. Now, both of those guys are training for a sub 220 marathon. So last time they tried to do that was in Rotterdam, and I did a bit of analysis of their training. So here's Matt running around the track as part of his preparations, and here is Nick doing similar for his Berlin aspirations. So I thought, as I did some analysis of them last time, I thought I've had another go this time, see how the training is compared, and perhaps we'll have a bit of a discussion as whether we think they're going to break the 220 target this time, because both of them have been very close but haven't yet managed it. Okay, so we can't do any analysis without one of my customary spreadsheets. So here's a summary one. So on the left here is what I did for Rotterdam. Now what I did is I took the 14 weeks prior to the race, apart from the last race, because I did think that such a taper week that wasn't really worth considering. I did the same again for Berlin. I should stress that Nick and Matt are both on Strava, and last time I had Seth James Demore as well, but he's obviously been injured, as you probably know if you're a YouTube fan, so can't unfortunately include him this time. So I think my first takeaway would be that Matt has done slightly more training this time, whereas Nick's training is actually been quite similar, although their tune-up races have both been a little disappointing. So let's just dive into a bit more detail. So last time I had Nick doing 1,181 miles, and this time in the same 13-week period, apart from that last taper week, pretty much the same actually, 1,143. But see how Matt has done a lot more training this time. He's also been in Boulder in the US, which is at altitude, so I think the miles there are perhaps worth more than they are elsewhere. It was a bit difficult to work out what their average pace was, but I think there's no doubt that Nick and Matt will probably be similar around there, just under 7-minute mile pace. Seth was a lot slower last time. Their goals this time have changed. I think literally just scraping under 220 as best as they can. I think both of them have said they want to try and split 70 minutes exactly at halfway, maybe and do a slight negative split. If you look down closely here, their long runs are exactly the same, 24.9 miles. We'll go into a bit more detail of how many long runs they did. And then I've split it into, by looking at Strava, the number of miles they did at marathon pace, which for a sub 220 is 520 minutes per mile or 319 minutes per K. So any miles when they were doing around that sort of target, I counted as marathon pace. Anything that was faster than that, obviously faster than marathon pace, and also had this concept of aerobic threshold miles. That was probably runs where they're doing around about 6-minute mile pace, something like that. Still fairly quick running, but certainly not marathon pace, and certainly not recovery runs. It's a bit subjective that, but I thought it'd be useful for working out the 80-20 ratio. So if we look at the number of marathon pace miles they've done this time, and Nick's figures are very similar. He does seem to emphasize quality over marathon pace work, and you can see here that his number of miles is miles more, no pun intended, than Matt's. Although don't forget, of course, Matt's doing his at altitude, so you could argue that some of his faster work is actually significantly faster. But even so, I think there's the same pattern there, that Nick does like to do his sort of hard sessions for sure. So as I said, Nick's got pretty much identical sort of breakdown of mileage, where Matt has actually done slightly less miles at a faster pace this time, but more overall volume. So maybe just targeting the sessions, maybe being mindful that he's at altitude, he has to sort of back off slightly. He did slightly more aerobic threshold miles. He did quite a lot of long runs, around about 6-minute mile pace, which must be good training in those conditions. So overall, he was slightly down on his sort of fast miles in inverted commas, whereas Nick was slightly above it. And on the 80-20 ratio rule there, you can see that Nick was pretty close to 80-20 last time. This time he's actually gone a bit harder. He's up to 73%, whereas Matt has perhaps gone the other way. He's now going closer to 80-20, whereas previously he was definitely emphasising quality over quantity, should we say. Now, their tune-up races, Nick had a real breakthrough half marathon, 66.19, when he won the Cambridge half marathon. Matt didn't manage to finish one. This time, Nick did 69 minutes and Matt did 70 minutes. Now, I think the 70 minutes was on a hilly course, and Nick was in the big half there. I think both of their sort of race performances this time have been a bit disappointing. If we go into a bit more detail on that, I've found 3 races for Nick that I've actually got on Power of 10. A 5k, a park run, and that half marathon. Now the 5ks were pretty good, but considerably slower than the 14:34 he did last winter. And Matt there, if he's hoping to break 2:20, well, he was exactly on pace at halfway. So just hoping that that race really was hilly and he can come through. So I think this time, if you go back to the summary again, I think what I would say, looking at this so far, that they've really emphasised training this time. And I think some of the races that they've done and the harder sessions maybe haven't been quite as impressive as the last block, but I think they've obviously learned from that last block. If you go into the detail a bit more about when these long runs were, so this time their long runs were both done about 6 weeks ago, which is kind of similar to what they did last time. If you see there with Seth, he did his long run quite early in the block, and there was some doubt as he got that right, but he's actually ended up with the 2:22, so you could argue that it proved the doubters wrong. Whereas Nick was the fastest last time. He managed to do a 2:20.59, and Matt didn't finish due to cramps. I think in summary, I would say that their training has gone well this time, at least as well as last time. Bit of a doubt of how fresh they are going to come into the races, because their tune-up races were a bit disappointing, but that might actually help in a way not to get too carried away. And perhaps there was an element last time that the tune-up races were ended up better than the marathon themselves. So I think Nick did say when one of his first videos he was going to make that mistake again. And Matt's been incredibly analytical in his approach, done an awful lot of videos himself this time. It's actually been more interesting, I think, looking at his videos of himself as a sort of elite runner than some of the sort of the random views you see of these pro runners who you don't really relate to because you don't really know who they are. So I think in that sense, the sort of the pivot of the channel to focus more on himself and more to the people that they can sort of do follow-ups on, I think it's been really welcome. I think that would be really good. I think when Matt moves to London after the race and then probably teams up with training with Nick, I think they're going to work together on Best Athletics, then that's going to be good for both of them and presumably good for whoever trains with them. So how do you see it going? Do any of your friends running the Berlin Marathon? I'll be sure to tune in on Sunday with interest to see how they get on. So I hope you found this interesting. Like and subscribe for that, and see you on the next one then. Bye.